Welcome back. All right, so I want to talk about awards. Of course, the NHL gets started up again tomorrow. We're almost halfway through the season, and once you get a little past the halfway mark, we start getting to discussions of who's the front runners for which awards. And it's fun to talk about. You'll always see the comments of, well, it's too early to speculate. It's never too early to speculate. That's why you see The Athletic doing things on who's going to lead the power rankings 2 years from now. And people commenting on that and clicking on that because it's an interesting discussion. And I want to talk about the awards since they've been in the discussions as to whether or not the names should be changed. I think that what I need to do is a series on the players and people that the names are based on. So why is it the Art Ross? Why is it the Hart? Why is it? And get into who these people were and are, and why they ended up having those trophies named after them, or why Lady Bing. That's an interesting comment as well. The one thing, of course, with history videos, they don't generally get the most clicks, but they can get a lot of discussion. So that's not always the same thing. Sometimes the most watched video may not be the most discussed, and the least watched can be the most discussed later on. So I wanted to put these awards in a certain order, and there's a reason why. So I'm going to start with the Jack Adams. The Jack Adams, of course, is for Coach of the Year. Now, if we look back to last year's voting, Daryl Sutter ended up winning, had 353 points in the vote. Andrew Burnett was second at 249 and didn't keep his job through the summer. Gerard Gallant, 142 points, and depending on the week, sometimes Ranger fans think he should be gone. And with the Flames, if they miss the playoffs, does Daryl Sutter keep his job? And then you've got John Cooper, coach of the Tampa Bay Lightning, who got 12 points when it came to votes last year. And the discussion is always along the lines of Cooper doesn't win the award. I think there's something broken with the Jack Adams Award. It gets voted for based on the surprise team. So I did the video earlier on 7 positive and negative surprises. The team that is the biggest surprise, very often that coach will end up getting the vote. And I think that's part of the flaw when it comes to Coach of the Year. I think it should be the best coach in the NHL. Period. Which means that you may end up with multiple years in a row being the same guy. But the fact that John Cooper doesn't end up in the conversation is because Tampa Bay's a really good team. Does that make him less of a coach? No. But the way that Coach of the Year has been voted on for decades, in my opinion, is kind of broken. That, when Scotty Bowman was coach, he probably should have been Jack Adams winner almost every year as Coach of the Year. But again, the argument would have been, well, look at that team in Detroit. They're a fantastic team. Yeah, Bowman's a great coach, arguably the greatest of all time. But this year, he's not the best coach because we had an unexpected run from Florida. We had an unexpected run from Carolina, an unexpected run. So that coach is Coach of the Year this year. It's an odd award, and it's odd for that reason. But it's also why I don't pay much attention to the Jack Adams, because whoever wins it very often won't be there very much longer. It's not like it gives them any job security. They don't get an extra year on their contract for winning the Jack Adams. Then you get into the Hart. Now, the Hart and the Lindsay are separated. And when I did this out, I probably should have the Hart and the Lindsay together, and there's a reason. The Hart is the most valuable player. The Ted Lindsay is the most outstanding player. The way that I put it is, the Ted Lindsay is, and this is voted on by the players, the best player in the league. That's it. Most valuable player is something different. Most valuable player to me says, without this player, this team is screwed. They're done. They're in trouble. So that's why it's an award that will go to a player that has a team in the playoffs. Because if a team has 60 points, it's hard to argue that they have the MVP of the entire league. Now, there are people who will make the argument for why certain players should be in the Hart conversation, even though they're on a team that's outside the playoffs. And maybe in a league where half the teams miss the playoffs, we'll start to see that rule change a little bit. Maybe teams that are close to the playoff line and end up below will still have the Hart winner. Now, this year, of course, Matthews won. He had 1,630 points. McDavid, 1,111. Shesterkin, 738. But if Shesterkin had gotten hurt in Game 1 of the first round against the Penguins, do the Rangers go anywhere in the playoffs? I'll answer no. And I say that because Shesterkin had an out-of-his-mind year last year, which meant that he ended up being the Vezina winner as best goaltender. Best goaltender, and this is voted on by the GMs, is different. The Vezina trophy has nothing to do with the press whatsoever, even though I'll see that. I'll see, well, the press has an East Coast bias, that's why this guy won the Vezina. No. Now, the GMs themselves may be more easterly based as well. There is a bias in some of the voting towards Eastern teams, sure. But Shesterkin with 154 points, that checks out. Markstrom had 53 and Saros had 32. And you look at this year, I don't know that any of those guys would be top three this season at this stage, although Shesterkin's pushing his way into that conversation. And that's why the Vezina is one of those interesting ones, because your best goaltender from one year to the next invariably changes. And then we have the discussion of, well, who's the overall best goaltender? And it's just a drag-out fight. And it should be. And yet I would say I'd lean towards Vasilevsky as the best goalie in the league right now, even though he wasn't top three last year in Vezina. And if you're doing the Vezina voting this year, he's not in the top three. I don't think he is anyways. You guys can let me know in the comment section below who you think would be the top three goaltenders if the Vezina vote was held today. And I almost guarantee that very few of those would line up, because with goaltenders, we can have the discussion of, goalies whose numbers are held down because the defense is in front of them, and goalies whose numbers are better because the defense is in front of them as well, right? So that's a conversation point. Then you've got the Norris. Is the voting for the Norris broken? Going back decades. So same as the Jack Adams Award, the argument has been that the best defenseman is not necessarily the Norris Trophy winner, which is supposed to be the best defenseman. Being the top scoring defenseman doesn't necessarily mean you're the best defenseman, because the role of a forward, big part of it is scoring goals. There is, of course, the defensive side, which is where the Selke Trophy comes in, but your best defenseman should really be capable of performing both jobs, of being really good in the offensive end, and then at the defensive end, absolutely solid, good back checking, really hard working, that 200-foot. They should have that defenseman as the Norris Trophy winner each year. It doesn't always work that way. Nick Lidstrom's an example of a defenseman that was elite at both ends of the ice. Now, this past year, Makar won. He had 1,631 points. Yossi had 1,606, and Hedman had 940. So it really was the Makar and Yossi show last year. Now, Yossi ended up with almost 100 points, did not reach that level. At one point during the season, it looked like he would. And if he had, he might have ended up winning the Norris Trophy, which, should that matter? Should the number of points matter for the Norris Trophy? Again, my answer would be no, because it's only part of the story with the defenseman. But the NHL voting makes it different. And so Makar, I do believe, is elite at both ends of the ice. I've seen the conversations about whether or not he's good defensively. And when I see things along the lines of, well, if he learns to play defense, I think, you don't watch Makar. But again, for me, the best defenseman in the league, you can make the argument for Hedman. You can make the argument for Adam Fox. You can make the argument for a number of defensemen. And if you're a Canes fan, you're probably saying, what about Jacob Slavin? And you'd be right. Slavin's not going to get the votes because he's not going to get the points totals that he should in order to get that Norris Trophy consideration. I say should because if he wants to, he can get them. He showed last year the offense is good with Slavin. It's not like he's not capable as an offensive defenseman. He plays the defensive side. And I don't think that should penalize him when we're talking about the best defenseman in the league. But it's always been who scores the most points. And then you get into the defensive aspect does make some impact, but the most points definitely gets you that attention. And then there's the Selke. So the Selke Trophy, of course, your best defensive forward. Best defensive forward. The one that always makes me laugh with the Selke, though, and I've talked about this in many a career video. I've pointed this out with players who've been in the Selke conversation or have won the Selke. The year they win the Selke Trophy is very often the year their points total goes up. So you might have a really elite defensive forward who scores 40 points a year. He's an elite defensive forward. He's top 5 in the Selke. The next year he gets 75 points. He wins the Selke that year. And I've always thought that's weird. So the extra points get some more attention, but isn't it supposed to be about who the best defensive forward is? So Bergeron won it again because it's his award. 1,808 points for him this past year, 878 for Lindholm, 736 for Barkov. Notice that all three of them are very good offensive forwards as well. So the true defensive forward, and I'm not saying Bergeron's not elite defensively because he is, but that true defensive forward is kind of as overlooked as that true defensive defenseman. I'm talking your third, fourth line player. I'm talking your Teddy Blugers. The guys who can be elite defensively, who come back and back check with reckless abandon, throw body checks like nobody's business. There is no award for them because the Selke Trophy, even after Bergeron has retired, moved on, it will always go to that really good defensive forward who also scores a bunch of points, which, by the name of it, isn't really what the award is, right? So that's one of those things that I've always thought was odd when it comes to the trophies. That the Selke goes to your best defensive defenseman, who also got a bunch of points. The Norris goes to the best defenseman, who also kind of had to get a bunch of points. And the Lindsay and the Hart Trophy kind of say the same thing. Because again, while I put the qualifier in there of this is your most valuable player, and this is the best player, there are those who will argue that's the same thing. One's voted on by the players, one's voted on by reporters. You can't have the fans voting on these, obviously. You have to have a certain group of people who are deciding that vote. I honestly would be fine with players voting on all of them. I would be fine with the NHL saying, you know what? We're going to let the players vote. Let the coaches vote on who the coach of the year is. And leave it at that. And just take it away from the reporters. I would be fine with that. I'm not saying that'll happen at any point, but I think the best ones to make the decision are players and coaches, the guys who are actually in the National Hockey League. And then I've seen the comment as well of, well, you know, the players, they don't see everybody every night. So when they vote for this guy for this award, they don't really know. Well, reporters don't watch every single game either. Some might, right? Some might very well be as dedicated as I try to be to see as much hockey as I can. But there are going to be those who go by highlight reels and what they see in the stat sheets and what certain websites might tell them about who the best is when they make their vote. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but I do wonder with awards at times if it's decided in a manner that really works. And I don't think there's any desire from the NHL side of things to change it. So why would I be wearing a Penguins jersey for this video? You don't see Mike Sullivan under Jack Adams, and yet no matter how injured the Pittsburgh Penguins are, they make the playoffs. You don't see Sidney Crosby for the Hart, doesn't get the Lindsay votes he used to, and yet you can still make the argument he's the best player in the NHL. I do look at these, I've always kind of viewed them with like this taking them with a grain of salt kind of thing, in that, yes, this year this guy was outstanding, but is the best overall player that player. So if it's a Game 7, you need to win the Stanley Cup, and it's a Game 7, is Austin Matthews your guy? It's okay to say yes. I personally would say, I'm still leaning towards Crosby. If it's a Game 7, it's a Stanley Cup final, I'm leaning towards Sidney Crosby. That's the guy I want driving the ship. That's the guy that I would go for. So from that level, does it make him the best player in the NHL? That argument can be there. And it does mean that when I talk about the best player in the league and I say it's Connor McDavid, if that Game 7 question comes up, I have to turn back and say, I do think McDavid's probably the best player in the league, most talented. But man, in a Game 7 situation, I think I'd want it to be Sid. I think I'd want it to be Crosby. Because in that situation, we've seen when it's a big key game, he can be the guy. And I'm saying that even though Pittsburgh's lost in the first round every year since 2019. There's still that feeling there that Crosby's the guy who can get you over the finish line. And again, it's perception. Perception's 9/10 of reality, right? But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below when it comes to the trophies. Should they change the names of them? Again, like I said, I think I should do a look at George Vezina. I should take a look at James Norris, all the people that these are named after, who they were, and their legacy, and is it something that we should continue to have an award attached to, or should we change them? And get into that discussion. I think it goes award by award. I really think it does. But let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.